The woman behind the mahogany counter of Café Morganenlied wore a brooch shaped like a metronome. It ticked without gears, marking time according to the unspoken rhythm of Viennese hearts. Her name was Aurelia Hauser, and she was one of only a dozen infusioneers licensed by the city to bake pastries infused with bottled emotions, an art older than the Habsburgs, practiced quietly in Vienna's back rooms while empires rose and fell outside. It was a windless January evening. The Ringstrasse shimmered with sodium lamps, each arc of light reflecting in the frozen Danube Canal. Inside the cafe, candles flickered in delicate crystal globes, and a rotary phonograph murmured Schubert. On most nights, the mood was a gentle swell of nostalgia, Aurelia's signature recipe. Tonight, however, nostalgia gave way to raw sorrow, carried in by Victor Rilke, the youngest pianist ever to sell out the Musikverein's Goldene Saal. His tuxedo jacket hung like wet laundry from his shoulders, and his green eyes, usually alight with mischief, held a devastated glaze. He slid onto the stool farthest from the gramophone, as though piano music itself were a wound. Aurelia approached, pressing her palms against polished walnut. "Maestro Rilke," she said softly, careful not to disturb the hush. "Your usual melancholy tart?" Victor shook his head. "No melancholy tonight." His throat bobbed and words caught like fish in a net. "I need something else." Aurelia's amber eyes rested on him with professional attentiveness. "The council restricts us to single-portion doses, you know that. Too much of any feeling can warp the city. What is it you're seeking?" "Joy," he replied. The word cracked. "Enough to drown every other feeling." Aurelia's fingers tensed. It was illegal to dispense more than one pastry per person per day, a measure established after the infamous riot of '73, when a surplus of sugar-dusted impudence had led to duels on the Kachentnerstrasse. She could refuse him. She almost did. Yet she recognized in his eyes the riptide of heartbreak, the same look her husband had worn before he stepped off the Reisbrücke 12 years earlier. She turned, took a key shaped like a treble clef from her apron, and unlocked the iron gate leading to the kitchen laboratory. Shelves glimmered under gaslight, rows of glass vials, each containing a mote of emotion swirling like trapped aurora. Labeled in looping script: serenity, mischief, tender longing, quiet pride. Joy's glow was unmistakable, a brilliant saffron that pulsed to an unheard waltz. Aurelia extracted a single vial, cradling it as she would a robin's egg. Regulations required a scale, a ledger, the signature of another infusionaire. She ignored them all. In an antique mixing bowl, she whisked the vial's contents into an apricot glaze, folded it into layers of butter-laminated dough, and shaped the result into a spiral strudel, the metaphorical coil of life around itself. Before sliding it into the bronze oven, she whispered the incantation that stabilized emotional volatility. She missed a syllable. Nothing major, just a tiny slip where heartbreak snagged her concentration. 20 minutes later, the strudel emerged, exhaling steam that smelled like childhood laughter and the first warm day of spring. She placed it on Limoges china, added a silver fork, and set it in front of Victor. He devoured the pastry in 4 bites. A smile began on his lips, bloomed across his cheeks, and flared in his eyes with borderline mania. He clutched the counter for balance. "More," he gasped. "Please." Aurelia's own heart galloped. "Victor, you've had enough." He stood, wallet forgotten, chair tipping behind him. Then he staggered toward the glass doors, burst into the night, and vanished down Rotenturmstrasse. Aurelia cursed softly, wiped her hands, and dialed the emergency number of the Guild of Infusionaires. She got only a dull hum. The line had been disconnected since budget cuts after the Christmas markets. There was no authority left to call. Outside, Victor ran. Joy was turning to euphoria, then to something inflamed and centrifugal, like a polka played at triple tempo. Beneath the rising tide of ecstasy, his heartbreak still throbbed, trying to surface. To maintain equilibrium, his body sought an outlet. Movement. On Stephansplatz, he leapt onto a bench and began pounding imaginary keys on the winter air, giggling through chattering teeth. Tourists looked on, startled, phones raised. A policeman approached, but before he could speak, the rhythm caught him too. His boots started tapping, baton beating time against a lamppost. Joy is contagious. Bottled, it is potent. Unbridled, it is exponential. Within 20 minutes, 50 strangers were dancing. They locked arms, spun, laughed, until tears froze on lashes. Ice skittered off cobblestones where soles pounded. Cracks spidered through the asphalt like sheet music splitting at crescendos. The Ringstrasse is not merely a boulevard. It is a circular keystone, an architectural tension ring, binding old Vienna's delicate spirit. If stresses are unevenly distributed, the psychic architecture can fracture, and with it the actual stones. At Scheffe Morgenlied, Aurelia saw the first tremor, coffee cups rattling, chandeliers chiming dissonant ornaments. She snatched her coat and bolted onto the street, following the distant thump of improvised percussion. When she reached Stephansplatz, the scene had grown orchestral. A brass quartet from the opera house, on their way home, had succumbed to the vibration and now blared a frantic variation on Radetzky March. Couples waltzed while pigeons swirled overhead like cracked pepper. The policeman danced atop his police wagon in delirious half-time. The ground groaned. A cobble popped loose and skidded to Aurelia's feet. She knelt, fingertips on the stone. Through it pulsed the city's cultural heartbeat. Now rhythmic, if something wasn't done, the Ringstrasse would rupture, releasing centuries of curated myth. Vienna's Heimatgeist, that fragile amalgam of music, memory, and melancholy. Without that binding energy, the city would collapse into kitsch and rubble. She spotted Victor at the center of the storm, white shirt soaked with sweat, hair plastered like scribbles against his forehead. Each step he took sent a new wave outward. Hijacking bystanders' muscles, she elbowed through the crowd until she was close enough to grasp his wrist. "Victor!" she shouted, but joy detonated from him in laughter so bright she almost joined in. Her body wanted to spin. She planted her heels and forced her voice through the gale. "Listen to me. You must let it out another way. Play!" He shook his head, features a blur. "I can't. Piano is her memory." Tears flew from his lashes but evaporated before falling. Beneath joy, grief gnawed like rats in the walls. Aurelia thought fast. The Strudel overdose had set floodgates ajar. To close them, Victor needed a counterbalance, an emotion equal but opposite, absorbed in safe measure. She kept no supply on her person, but maybe someone else did. Her pupils flicked across the crowd, recognizing another infusionaire by the violet ribbon on her beret. Olga Schwartz. Historically, Olga specialized in stoic resignation, a steadying agent recommended for bureaucrats. Aurelia beckoned frantically. Olga wove through the dancers, fished a miniature meringue from her pocket and offered it. But resignation alone would only flatten joy, might plunge everyone into apathy so profound they'd lie down in traffic. No, they needed something more nuanced, grief itself, but distilled and manageable, to coax Victor into catharsis without drowning him. "Do you have Elegiac truffle?" Aurelia asked. "None," Olga said. "Sold out after New Year's divorces." Aurelia cursed. "Serenity?" Olga produced a lavender macaron. Aurelia seized it. "Combined with half your resonation crumble. Quick!" Olga crumbled grey powder over the macaron. Aurelia whispered a binding phrase. The pastry shimmered midnight blue. Now she had to get Victor to eat it. She slipped a hand around his neck, pulled his ear to her lips. "I can end this. Taste and remember why you feel joy at all." He met her gaze, lucid for a flicker, and allowed her to push the macaron between his teeth. He chewed, throat convulsing. Joy's glare dimmed. Tears welled again. Heavier. He staggered and the dancing slackened. Several revelers stopped, brows knitting in confusion. But the seismic trembling didn't. The Ringstrasse is slow to forgive. Stress lines had grown. To pacify them fully, Victor had to rechannel the energy into music, the city's natural release valve. Olga pointed to the grand piano displayed in the window of the Steinway showroom across the square. Its keys gleamed under showroom lights like a grin awaiting purpose. "Play!" Aurelia told him again. His mouth twisted. "I told you I can't play her memory." But the combined serenity and resignation was settling. He could see the catastrophe he was birthing. His shoulders fell, not in defeat, but surrender. "Help me." Aurelia nodded to Olga. Together, they shepherded Victor through slackening dancers, past a toppled brass player, to the glass storefront. Inside, no one remained. A security guard lay unconscious from fatigue. The door was locked. Olga inhaled, muttered an oath, and produced a cookie of unapologetic audacity. She tossed it in her mouth, chewed, and without hesitation smashed the glass pane with a cast-iron umbrella stand. The shards cascaded in shimmering apocalypse tones, but did not cut anyone. Audacity works in mysterious ways. They guided Victor to the black concert grand. He sat, fingers hovering. The last time he played had been 9 days earlier, when his fiancée, Czech violinist Lenka Novak, stormed out mid-rehearsal, taking with her both the duet they were composing and his illusions of permanence. She died the next morning in a tour bus accident outside Brno. Since then, Victor had refused the bench, blaming the piano for failing to accompany her in death. Now the keys awaited his fingertips like absolution. Aurelia held her breath. Outside, cracks snaked along the base of St. Stephen's South Tower. Stone cherubs trembled. Victor began with a single note, middle C, soft as dusk. Another note followed, a minor third below. The interval tasted of unresolved questions. Then, like someone locating a pulse, he added gentle chords, weaving a hymn that straddled sorrow and wonder. A lullaby for the city's soul. His left hand summoned gravitas in low octaves, while his right traced delicate arcs of joie de vivre. The very joy that had erupted now found discipline, shaped by grief's counterweight. It rose through the broken showroom window and drifted across the plaza. Dancers slowed to swaying, then to stillness. Heads bowed as though beneath cathedral ceilings. Stones settled. The invisible fractures knitting the Ringstrasse paused in their creep. But one fissure beneath the Opernringhard already widened to a hazard. Through it glowed something raw and golden, the Heimatgeist itself. Exposed. If it escaped, the city would lose its identity. Souvenir by souvenir, magnet shops would replace museums. The Blue Danube would be sponsored by cola. Aurelia realized the music alone might not suffice. They needed to reseal the fissure physically with the same substance that constituted Vienna's emotional mortar. Pastry. "Olga!" she hissed. "How much dough can we make in 15 minutes? Olga's eyebrows shot up. "Enough for a streusel patch?" "Maybe, but we need more infusionaires." Across the square, Aurelia saw 2 other ribbons, Dietmar, who specialized in cautious optimism, and Anika, mistress of faithful remorse. She signaled them. They hurried over. Briefly, she explained. They must bake a giant lattice strudel, infused with harmonious continuity, to lay like a blanket over the fissure until masons could repair the stone. "Continuity? That's restricted tier 1, Dietmar said. "Then we braid ingredients," Aurelia retorted. "Optimism, remorse, serenity, truth of memory. Blend them. The harmonic mean approximates continuity." They commandeered the showroom's kitchenette intended for champagne receptions and kneaded dough with feverish urgency. Each artisan uncorked a vial, trickling glowing essences into the mix. Green of cautious hope, indigo of remorseful wisdom, lilac of serenity. As they rolled, the dough shimmered, opalescent. Annika chanted a binding rondo. Olga brushed melted butter. Dietmar scattered candied orange peel. Meanwhile, Victor's music evolved, weaving scherzo into requiem. Listeners on balconies above wept silently. Umbrella handles clutched, unsure why they felt purged, yet intact. A strudel, as wide as a billiard table, was slid onto a sheet of copper appropriated from decorative roofing panels Olga had wrenched free with residual audacity. They couldn't bake it conventionally, so Aurelia improvised. She ignited bottled bravado, pouring it along the copper's underside. Blue flame whooshed, browning pastry in record time. Sugar caramelized, releasing a scent both familiar and epoch. Like every Viennese childhood distilled, they carried the steaming lattice on leather aprons to the fissure. Heat shimmered, snow hissed as they laid the strudel across the glowing crack. Butter seeped into stone, carrying harmonizing emotion into the fissure the way resin seals a violin's seam. The golden light beneath dimmed, contained. Silence descended on the city core. In the hush, Victor finished his final cadence, a C major chord, stacked like sunrise, and allowed his hands to fall. For a moment, no one moved. Then the city exhaled, a sigh rustling countless Christmas light garlands left up through Epiphany. Somewhere, a church bell that had chimed out of rhythm during the chaos now rang perfect quarter notes. Police arrived, bureaucrats, a member of the Parliamentary Cultural Committee with a scarf the colour of weak tea. Paperwork would be colossal. Smashed storefront, unauthorised emotion usage, dangerous pastry deployment. But for now, the officials sensed something bigger had occurred. They tiptoed as if inside a miracle's residue. Aurelia found Victor sitting on the showroom floor, back against the piano's polished flank. The hallucinatory grin was gone, replaced by a weary but genuine smile. "How do you feel?" she asked. "As though joy and grief finally introduced themselves," he said. "Will they stay civil?" "I hope so." He gazed at his hands. "I think I can play tomorrow's concert." She squeezed his shoulder. "Play for her, but also for the city. It's listening." Aurelia expected reprimand from the Infusionaire Oversight Board, or what remained of it. Instead, the next morning she received a sealed envelope stamped with the crest of the mayor of Vienna. Inside was a single sheet. In recognition of swift action preserving the structural and spiritual integrity of the Ringstrasse, the council grants Café Morgenlied an exemption for emergency emotional dispensation. Continue your craft with utmost prudence. Beneath the letter lay a brooch, twin to her ticking metronome but shaped like an eighth note. She pinned it beside the old one, feeling each tick synchronize with the quiet aftermath outside. That evening, the Musikverein overflowed. Not a spare seat nor a dry eye in gold-leafed boxes. Victor, tuxedo pressed, hair neatly combed, addressed the audience. "This piece is unfinished," he said, voice steady. "I will finish it now with you." He played. In the balcony, Aurelia tasted the performance as surely as a pastry. Joy layered over grief, sugared with resilience. Each chord was a bridge across a fissure no one could see, but everyone carried. When the final note dissolved, the applause was thunder but controlled. No tremor in the marble. Vienna had learned the price of ungoverned feeling and the power of balanced flavor. Afterward, Victor joined Aurelia at Café Morgenlied. Together they sipped melange while snow began again, soft as powdered sugar. Through the window, the city lights traced the Ringstrasse's perfect circle, now unbroken. Aurelia served him a modest slice of marzipan torte imbued with gentle anticipation, exactly regulation size. He savoured it, smiled, and when he set down his fork, he said, "Perhaps tomorrow I'll try something tinged with possibility." She nodded. Tomorrow's menu is possibility. Outside, a group of late-night cyclists passed, humming a waltz. The fissure beneath Oppenring remained patched, the strudel already hardening to something like legend. Tour guides would speak of it within weeks, skepticism mingling with wonder. But those who had danced that night would remember how pastry held the city together and how a heartbroken pianist, overdosed on illicit joy, transformed chaos into a new composition. Because in Vienna, as everyone secretly knows, emotions are not merely felt. They're baked, served, and, if fortune smiles, singing but never shattering.